Thank you very much, and thank you for a great conference. It's been a really good use of time. I've met some of you in the audience. My name is Jennifer Fritchie. I'm what's called a sell-side analyst following the tower sector and the services sector, so I recommend or not recommend the stocks and write a lot of reports on those. We have a big distribution list that I'm happy to add anyone to if you give me your card. But we're really excited today to have these four gentlemen to my left to discuss the ROI of mobile broadband. It's kind of a loaded title, but we had a prep call and I had 3 pages worth of notes, so I learned a lot and I should be one of the experts, so I think everyone should get a lot out of this conference. To my left is Bob Butchko from RF Connect. To his left is Boris Golubovic, I'm hoping I got that right, Boris, with TE Connectivity. Then we have Kevin Swank with Blackbox, and then finally to Kevin's left is Todd Landry with NEC Corp. So welcome, gentlemen, and we're excited to have you. Maybe the best way is to go down the line and give a brief introduction and talk about each of your roles at your respective companies.
Okay, my name is Bob Butchko from RF Connect. We're a DAS systems integration company. We've been in business for about 11 years now. We've done 1,500 relatively major installations of DAS across the country. We've got 5 different offices on both the East Coast and West Coast and in the midsection of the country. The corporate headquarters is in Detroit, and we have full turnkey services on DAS. We assess, we design, we support long-term, we consult, and we've have quite a bit of experience all the way around in the industry over the last 10 years.
Good afternoon. I'm Boris Golubovic, TE Connectivity. We are a broad network solution provider, anywhere from subsea cables all the way to DAS and wireless solutions. So we cover the entire spectrum in connectivity for our customers, from over fiber, copper, and wireless spectrum, and I'm responsible for our wireless networks products that we are discussing today.
Okay. My name is Kevin Swank. I am the Director of Product Marketing for Blackbox, focused on DAS and small cells. Similar to Bob, we're an integrator and been around for a dozen years or so, doing primarily DAS deployments in vertical industries such as healthcare and hospitality, very hard venues. So glad to be here.
Todd, I'm going to interrupt. I apologize. Here with JMA Wireless, and I gave one of your prior homes. Excuse me.
Reading my resume up there.
Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Todd Landry with JMA Wireless. We're a developer and manufacturer of distributed antenna systems. We have global presence and deployments in hundreds of different vertical industries, whether the metro transportation environments to stadiums, some of the highest tech stadiums we have in the country here. I run the product and market strategy for the organization globally, and happy to be here with you.
Terrific. Well, welcome, everyone. Maybe I'll start with an open-ended question, just the tone of the business right now. Would you characterize yourself as busy, very busy, or drinking from a fire hose type of busy?
Well, if you're not busy in this environment, then you're probably not in business in this environment. You know, I think it's manageable. I think that you have to, basically tailor what you offer to the individual demands of the marketplace. And it doesn't mean that you do everything, but you do the ones that are, buildings and so forth that you have the capability to do. So, but it's obviously, I thought that the couple first sessions where we started talking about when Ian asked about, well, do you think the demand's going to grow over time? Well, we've been asking that for a long time now, and ever since Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone back in 2007 or whatever, it's been growing exponentially. It's obviously not going to stop. So it's a good marketplace.
Of course.
I would say busy and fire hose could be applied, but I think the biggest attribute that I would put to the industry, it's changing, and I think we are moving with the usage of mobile being so high, moving to a state where it's really going from a few and specialized applications to ubiquitous deployment of the cellular network, and it's moving closer and closer to us as individuals.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it's somewhere between busy and fire hose. But it's also, if I look at our company at being an integrator and what's happening in the industry just from a architecture perspective, from a device perspective, a usage perspective, I feel like we have to reinvent ourselves about every 6 months, just to keep up and keep moving. If you look over the last, 6 months to a year, when small cells were going to take over the world, and now we've gone back to realizing, you know what, DAS is here, it's here to stay, and the DAS manufacturers are re-architecting their solutions to be different, and causing, lots of new opportunities. And so, I think that's good for the industry is, we're constantly reinventing ourselves, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I wish it was only one fire hose. No, I think what you'll hear is it's an incredible time to be in this industry. You heard it from Paula on the stage here before. To me, what's incredible about the timing in this industry is, we're on the verge of really going to the next level with broadband mobile access, the topic of this session, of course. And as a result of that, the demand for what's possible and the demand to get deployments, coverage, capacity out there is tremendous right now. And certainly for us, it's incredibly busy. So it's great stuff.
Great. One of the takeaways from this conference really, it seems to be clearly 3 types of business models for DAS. One, you have the neutral party owned. Secondly, as Paula spoke of, the carrier owned DAS. And then third is enterprise owned. Can you talk about the roles of the enterprise, the carrier, and the system integrator in each of these different business models?
Well, we're systems integrators, so we're going to integrate the system in all 3 of them, but I think that each of them has their own individual characteristics. I like to talk about, just follow the money. Who's going to pay for this, and who's your boss, and who's going to, come up with the needs and so forth. And each one of those areas has a different model. I think that the most challenging model today and into the future is definitely going to be the enterprise model, and finding out who pays there and how all that comes together. The others seem to be fairly staid. They have a process. The enterprise doesn't really have a process yet. There are several different ways to go about it, but nothing has settled into where a building owner just says, oh yeah, here I do steps 1, 2, and 3, and and off you go, and you've got a DAS installed. So all 3 of them have their different processes and so forth.
I would probably argue that the enterprise one is the hardest because there's very little precedent in it. It's the one that is, due to the lack of precedent, we are applying the same model of recouping costs as we would for a large venue, which clearly is not the case. And I wonder sometimes if it's a branding issue. If we were to call our DAS or any type of in-building enterprise solution, we're giving you a access point, people would say, oh, access point sounds like Wi-Fi, so I got to pay for it. So maybe one of the things is branding, or in some sense explaining what problem are we solving. So if we accept that in the enterprise space, enterprise Wi-Fi installation in a building is covered by the venue owner, I think it's not a stretch to say if we provide license band access points, that the similar business model would not be out of the question.
Yeah, so I look at it, they are completely, different models with respect to who's paying, but I think there is commonality in all of the different models, and the commonality is there is a venue, so there is a customer, and there is a carrier that is defining what we as integrators need to be able to achieve, what kind of SLAs we need to be able to achieve, what type of design characteristics we need to be able to achieve in that venue. And so there is a big tie between the carrier and the integrator. One thing that I see happen in a lot of venues is a lot of times the venue actually gets lost. At the end of the day, there is an enterprise, and either someone has said that venue is a good venue to fund, so a carrier or a third-party operator has said that's a really good venue to fund because there's lots of people in there, there's lots of things going on. It could be a stadium, it could be a hospital, it could be a variety of environments. But at the end of the day, there is an enterprise there that is trying to run their business. But what's unique about the enterprises today is, and the Wi-Fi example is good, is they know Wi-Fi. They know how to do Wi-Fi. They're versed in Wi-Fi. The IT groups know Wi-Fi. They don't know cellular. They don't know LTE. They don't know anything about the industry that we're working in. So everything that they work in is really, it's really foreign to that enterprise. And so, however they get the money, whether they fund it, and you're right, there is no budget for this. So they hope that the carriers or the third-party operators deem their venue as important enough that they'll get the funding. But if not, it is our job to help them through that funding discussion, so that it may not be in this year's budget, but maybe it's in next year's budget. And you do have to go through that cycle. Fortunately, there's enough venues out there that we'll get through that cycle. But we do have a massive education to continue to do inside of the enterprise, and for all three models to work.
Yeah, and I think similarly to what you hear up here, each of the types of venues have different situations, different characteristics. The demand for where their money flows can be highly dependent on what the audience is in that particular venue. And all of you have seen the commercials. Every carrier wants to have available service for their audience, for their users. As a result of that, there is a high desire to make sure that coverage and that capacity exists. So if it's a very high-profile venue, there's a much higher desire to want to make sure I can be in there. And that might create some unique business models for those venue owners. In terms of ownership, I think we, of course, work with both the carriers and many of the neutral host providers or integrators in that process. And as mentioned up here, designing and doing the RF engineering for a cellular solution in a building or as outdoor DAS type solution is quite different than putting in Wi-Fi. And as a result of that, you do need to have on staff the right level of expertise. So we would tend to go down the path of pointing people to those experts that are partners of ours that help design a solution around their environment in their venue. And I think that's a critical piece if you're a venue owner, an enterprise owner. Don't take it lightly. It is a serious RF engineering task, and you want to make sure you have the right experts working with you to get that done. By the way, it's much more costly to replace something that you tried than it is to do it right the first time.
It's true. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, let me comment on what Kevin said. So I think he brought up a good point, and that is the fact that a lot of the building owners know about Wi-Fi, and it's relatively inexpensive to put in Wi-Fi. There's lots of people to help you to do that, and they certainly that's the first stop. We got to have Wi-Fi. But and in fact, that the building owners and developers don't know much about the cellular world. And the problem is that they try to recreate the wheel every time that this question gets asked. I mean, every new building in the country, when a developer is putting together the GC and all the costs of the building and stuff like that, every time the question is asked, what do we do about cell phone coverage? And that question is always pushed way down the path, okay? And so I had a large developer in DC say, we'd like to get ahead of the curve occasionally and not worry about cell phone coverage when we're at the ribbon cutting ceremony for the building, okay? And that's usually when it comes to be. So I think that today's integrator really needs to be a teacher and a guide, and have processes similar to what AT&T has. AT&T has very strict policies and procedures. How do you go about doing this if you're a systems integrator? I think we need to teach the building owner and show them really very strong and solid processes of how this thing gets done. Okay, because if you don't do it in the right steps, you're going to have problems going down the line. So I couldn't agree more with Kevin.
When we talk about a continuous theme, is that enterprise is the kind of key focus here. And I guess I didn't appreciate that, we've been taught that there's 85% of the buildings that should require DAS still don't have it. And so therefore the runway is really long. But if you, like we were talking earlier, Bob, that an enterprise might have the need, because it might be in a building which carriers don't really care about. How often are you seeing that, where there is more sense of an urgency with the particular enterprise within the building, and the carrier, it's not even on their radar screen?
Well, I think you see it in most large buildings today that are being created, and you see it, and you definitely see it in older buildings. I mean, there's 100,000 existing buildings in the U.S. That are in dense urban dense metropolitan areas that need amplification. But once the building is built, it's a profit center. They don't have the money, and how do you go about providing those services?
But are the carriers caring about those buildings? Or does it have to be over the 500,000 square? What's the magic number for the carriers to say we got to get this DAS enabled in our world? Is it 500,000 square feet? Is it more, less?
So, I think, since we don't have any carriers on this panel, but, I think there is a right, a lot of it has to do with, I like the title of the book, location connectivity. So I think, a lot of what the carriers are looking at today is location, and the density of that building. And, so if you are, a high rise and you're next to an interstate, then yeah, you're going to be much more apt to get a system than, say, if you're in a rural area, or if you're not. I mean, we've had situations where in the same hospital chain, in the same city, where one hospital gets approved and another one doesn't. And so, so there is an ROI that the carriers go through, and there is a long list of venues that the carriers would like to address. But I mean, there are only so much money, and we've heard that over and over again. But there are also only so many RF engineers on the planet. I mean, there's not that many of them. So these are things that scale in this industry is a hard thing. But even with that said, there are alternatives, and and if you are looking at an older building, even if you're looking at a newer building, I mean, we've run into buildings where the building owner thinks, hey, everything's great. Then they put up E-rated glass on the outside of the building, and all of a sudden nothing works. And and there's a panic. If it's a financial institution, there's a panic, because all of a sudden you're going to have traders in that building, or financial people in that building that can't communicate. And those buildings all of a sudden find money quick. And so and I don't know that. So I did give an answer, at least, with respect to, maybe the way carriers look at this, but, it's also on the enterprise, and the enterprise has to decide, is this important for me, right? Is this something I want to own? Because enterprises today own Wi-Fi, right? Could they own DAS? Yes. Are some of them owning DAS? Yes. And so, if you want the fastest way to get your enterprise up and running, to do it yourself. I mean, that is the fastest way to get it done. So I mean, there are the other funding models, but if you want to do it fast, you do it yourself.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, at a fundamental level, the carriers want to have coverage and capacity for all their users, right? This is important for them, regardless ultimately of where you are, but the challenge and whether or not there's a tier in an enterprise that you can draw a line on to whether they're interested or not, I think would be difficult. I think the challenge we have a bit in our industry is to say, when I build a facility, if I'm doing new build out, what are the standards and what are the things I'm laying out in that facility to ensure that it's ready to add coverage and capacity? What are the guidelines? You mentioned the idea that, I replace the glass, and if you don't know, LEED's rated glass will block signal. It'll degrade signal. So, and at this session, I think yesterday we had the president of the ACUDA organization for universities, and they're working on establishing some architectural guidelines for all the universities to use as a reference point to consider what they need in their facilities to make sure that they can have the means to provide coverage. The way to get coverage could mean many things. You heard earlier from Paula that make sure you design into your facility the mechanism, the right-of-ways for cable, coax, fiber, the availability of conditioned power so you can put equipment in. The context was upgrades, but if you don't have that place, those places designed right from the beginning, it's much more difficult to bring DAS capabilities and coverage into your enterprise.
But I'd like to go back a little bit to the point that hundreds of thousands of buildings that may be sort of below the threshold of interest. I don't think they're below the threshold. I'm going to speak assuming that the carrier is interested in keeping as many customers happy as possible, but it does take time, effort to build up the ecosystem that can support a large number of smaller revenue-generating entities. I think we will see that the small cell evolution, as the operators are rolling them out for purposes of filling in gaps in the coverage today, start rolling those out more broadly, and the infrastructure supports them well, we become more comfortable with them. They could be really the enabling factor for those hundreds of thousands of buildings that perhaps by sheer numbers of users below the interest threshold, I'm going to call it that way, to be able to self-finance the installation. Let's call it the enterprise DAS, like a better term. We will, between all of us, will figure out how to make it easy to install. We'll come up with some good products and good rules, but we still need the operators to make that RF connection.
That's right. So I think picking off on what you're saying, though, the innovation, we represent vendors up here, so I think can say that we see the opportunities here to innovate, to make the deployment an easier process, to make the systems capable of understanding the environment and optimizing for the environment and the coverage, so you have to do a little less RF engineering, and the products are easier to install. You can do Wi-Fi environments fairly easily these days, and as we innovate in this space, I think we're going to find we will make it easier for enterprises to take this on themselves.
And the operators will make it easier and be in the position to provide gear that is in the IT price range as the access to the mobile network. And I think that will be they will be our partner along with the customer to really break the barrier that DAS becomes more democratized, I guess, in lack of any better term.
Yeah. In that same vein, there's 6 verticals. I'm going to have to look to my notes because I'm not going to remember, but the HETNET forum defines. We have healthcare, higher ed, large public venues such as stadiums and airports, corporate and commercial real estate, and public safety and hospitality. As we look at each of these vertical segments, what is the best opportunity for the independent DAS provider?